This happened to me about 3 years ago when I was 26 and living alone in a small apartment on the second floor of an old brick building. I had moved there after a breakup, mostly because the rent was cheap and the neighborhood was fairly quiet. It wasn't the nicest place, but it was mine, and I felt like I was finally settling into a routine. The apartment had just one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a cramped bathroom with a tiny window above the tub. It barely opened more than a foot, and honestly, I never thought much about it. It was the kind of window you'd forget even existed. At first, everything was normal. I'd go to work, come home, cook something easy, maybe watch some TV and crash. But after a few weeks, I started noticing something odd. The bathroom always felt cold, even on warm nights. The first time, I assumed it was the old building, drafty windows, thin walls. But one night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed the bathroom window was cracked open. That didn't make sense. I never opened it, and more importantly, I remembered locking it. The latch wasn't broken either. It was just unlocked. I told myself maybe I had forgotten, brushed it off, and locked it again. But the next morning, it was open again, only an inch, but unlocked. That's when the unease started creeping in. I even started making a habit of double-checking it before bed. I'd lock it, pull on it to make sure it was sealed, and sometimes even snap a quick picture on my phone for proof. Yet I'd wake up and it would be open just slightly. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the lock was faulty, maybe the frame was warped. Still, something about it felt wrong. To test it, I wedged a chair under the handle one night. If it somehow opened again, at least I'd know I wasn't imagining things. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft clatter. My heart pounded as I got up to check. The chair had been tipped slightly, just enough that the handle was freed. And sure enough, the window was open again. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. For the next week, I was on edge constantly. I'd hear faint noises, shuffling in the walls, something brushing against the pipes. Every creak of the building suddenly felt like someone moving. I even had dreams of waking up to see someone standing in the bathroom doorway. Then came the night that confirmed everything. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was about to head to bed. The shower curtain was drawn, which was unusual since I usually kept it that way. But as I leaned over the sink, I froze. There was a sound, faint but unmistakable. Breathing. Not my own. Slow, shallow breaths coming behind the curtain. My entire body locked up. My first thought was that maybe I was overtired, imagining it. But then I saw it, the bottom of the curtain moving just slightly, like someone had brushed against it. I didn't dare touch it. Instead, I backed out slowly, grabbed my phone, and called the police. While waiting, I stood in the living room, knife in hand, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. The police arrived within minutes. They swept the bathroom and found nobody, but when they pulled back the curtain, what they did find made my stomach drop. Muddy footprints on the tub floor, leading straight to the open window. Whoever it was had slipped out just before the police got there. The officers checked the window from outside. Apparently, the fire escape gave easy access, and the lock on the window frame was old and weak, easy to tamper with. What scared me the most was that it wasn't random. They told me the footprints suggested someone had done this more than once, climbing in through my bathroom window and leaving before I woke up. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I had bars installed on every window, and I moved out a month later. To this day, whenever I go into a bathroom with one of those small, high windows, I feel that same chill crawl up my spine. Because I can't stop thinking, how many nights did that person actually stand in my apartment, just watching me while I slept?
This happened about 4 years ago when I was 22. At the time, I was living in a mid-sized city, finishing my last year of college. I had just gotten a part-time job at a bookstore to help with rent, and most of my shifts ended late in the evening. My apartment wasn't far from the shop, about a 10-minute walk, but to save time, I usually drove. The building I lived in had a private lot out back, the kind where tenants needed a little key card to lift the gate. It wasn't the nicest neighborhood, but it wasn't terrible either. Mostly working-class people, students like me, and a few retirees who had lived there for decades. I had lived in that apartment for almost a year without any major problems, until one night changed the way I looked at my home forever. It was a Tuesday night, around 10:30 p.m. when my shift ended. The streets were quieter than usual because it was the middle of winter. Most nights, I would see a few people heading back from the nearby bars or restaurants, but that night, the sidewalks were practically empty. The air was biting cold, my breath puffing out in clouds as I hurried to my car. The lot behind my building wasn't huge, maybe 20 spots total. There was one flickering streetlight at the far end, and the rest of the space was mostly shadows. My car was parked closer to the back fence, under that dim light. As I pulled into the lot and drove up to the gate, I noticed something strange. A man was standing inside the lot. That caught my attention immediately, because the gate was supposed to be locked at all times. You couldn't just walk in without a key card. He was standing near the far corner, where the shadows pooled thickest, his back against the chain-link fence. At first, I thought maybe he was a tenant, but the way he stood, completely still, his head tilted slightly toward me, sent a shiver down my spine. I swiped my card, drove in, and tried to shrug it off. People loiter sometimes, right? Maybe he dropped something. Maybe he was smoking. Still, as I parked my car, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror. He hadn't moved. He was just watching. I got out of the car, trying to act normal, but my gut was screaming at me. The lot was dead silent except for the hum of that flickering light overhead. I locked my car and walked toward the entrance door of my building. My apartment was on the second floor, just above the lot, so the door wasn't far, maybe a 30-second walk. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. I glanced over my shoulder. The man was no longer by the fence. He was walking, slowly, deliberately, across the lot, heading in my direction. I quickened my pace, fumbling with my keys. The footsteps got faster, echoing against the pavement. My chest tightened with panic. I reached the entrance door, shoved my key in, and slammed it shut behind me, just as his shadow stretched across the concrete a few feet away. Through the little square of glass in the door, I saw him stop right where I had been standing. His face was pale under the light, his eyes wide and unblinking, his mouth curled in the faintest smile. He just stood there. I ran upstairs, my heart hammering, and went straight to my window that overlooked the lot. From there, I could see him clearly. He didn't leave. Instead, he slowly walked around the lot, scanning the parked cars, occasionally glancing up at the windows as if searching for me. I thought about calling the police, but part of me hesitated. What if he really was a tenant? What if I was overreacting? Still, something felt deeply wrong. His behavior wasn't normal. Then I watched in horror as he pulled something out of his jacket, a small crowbar. He walked up to the building door, the same one I had just gone through, and started testing the frame, pressing against the lock. He was trying to pry it open. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering frantically into the receiver. As I described the situation, I saw him give up on the door and wander back into the shadows of the lot. That made me even more uneasy. Where did he go? Was he hiding? few minutes later, red and blue lights flashed outside. 2 officers pulled in, searched the lot, and eventually found him crouched behind a parked SUV, still clutching the crowbar. They arrested him on the spot. Later, the police told me he wasn't a tenant. He didn't live in the building, didn't know anyone who did. He had a history of trespassing, burglary, and stalking. They suspected he had been watching the building for weeks, waiting for someone to slip up. I don't know if I was his target that night or if he was just looking for any opportunity, but the thought of how close he came, how easily he could have followed me inside, still keeps me up sometimes. After that, I moved out within 2 months. I couldn't bring myself to stay there, not after seeing his face pressed against the glass, smiling. To this day, whenever I park my car at night, I always check the lot twice before I get out.
I don't usually tell this story because every time I think about it, I get that same knot in my stomach I felt that night. But it's been years, and maybe writing it out will finally get it out of my head. This happened about 4 years ago, during the summer after my second year of college. 2 of my closest friends and I had decided to take a road trip across a couple of states. We didn't have a big budget, so we planned to drive mostly at night, crash at cheap motels, and save money on food by bringing snacks and stopping at small diners along the way. We were excited. The trip felt like freedom. Windows down, music blasting, long stretches of highway ahead. But the excitement faded a little on the 3rd night. We had been on the road for almost 12 hours straight, and by the time it was close to midnight, we were exhausted. The highway we were on stretched endlessly through the countryside with no other cars in sight. The only light came from our headlights and the occasional flicker of a neon gas station sign miles away. I was driving while my friends dozed off in the back. The road was empty, dead quiet, the kind of quiet where you start to notice how loud your own breathing is. At some point, I passed a rest stop. It was just a cracked parking lot, one vending machine glowing under a buzzing light, and a single parked semi-truck. I didn't stop, but something about it made me uneasy. About 20 minutes later, that's when I noticed the headlights. In my rearview mirror, far behind us, a pair of bright beams appeared on the horizon. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Cars came and went. But this one didn't pass. The lights kept their distance, staying far enough back that I couldn't see the vehicle clearly, but close enough that I knew they were following. I told myself I was being paranoid, but after half an hour, the car was still there. If I slowed down, it slowed down. If I sped up, it did too. My chest started to tighten. I thought about waking my friends, but I didn't want to sound crazy if it was nothing. Finally, I took an exit just to see what would happen. The headlights followed. The exit led to a 2-lane road with no streetlights, surrounded by nothing but cornfields. That's when the other car sped up, closing the distance. I could finally make it out. It was an old, beat-up pickup truck, the kind you'd expect to see rusting away in someone's yard. Its high beams flicked on, blinding me in my mirror. I shook my friends awake. They groggily sat up, confused, until they saw the truck behind us. "Don't stop," one of them whispered. I didn't plan to. My hands were slick on the steering wheel as I pushed the gas, the engine straining. For the next 15 minutes, the truck tailed us. Sometimes it would drift close, almost to my bumper, then fall back again. Once, it swerved sharply, like it was trying to herd us off the road. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. We finally spotted a sign for a small town up ahead. Population barely over 1,000. It felt like salvation. I floored it, racing toward the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. But the truck didn't follow us into town. As soon as we crossed under the first flickering lamppost, it slowed down, then made a U-turn back into the dark. Just like that, it was gone. We pulled into the only diner that was still open, our hands shaking as we ordered coffee just to calm down. The waitress asked if we were okay, and when we explained, she grew pale.
She told us that stretch of road had a reputation. Over the years, there had been stories of a pickup chasing people off the highway. Sometimes the victims would end up robbed, sometimes worse. She said a few missing persons cases had even started that way. We didn't finish the road trip. We booked a motel in that little town for the night, and the next morning we drove straight home, sticking to the busiest highways we could find. Even now, I think about those headlights in my rearview mirror, and I wonder if we hadn't made it to that town in time, what would have happened to us out there on that empty road?
I don't usually tell this story. Honestly, I try not to think about it too much. But it's one of those things that stays with you, whether you want it to or not. It was late autumn, a little after 11 p.m. I had just gotten off work. I lived about 20 minutes away on foot, and normally I didn't mind walking home. It was peaceful at that time of night. The streets were quiet, just the occasional car rolling by. That night was colder than usual. I remember seeing my breath hanging in the air as I walked, hands shoved into my jacket pockets. The sidewalks were damp from an earlier drizzle, and most of the houses I passed had their lights out already. It was the kind of night where the world feels empty, like you're the last person awake. About halfway home, I reached the intersection near an old convenience store. That's where I noticed him. A man, maybe in his mid-30s, standing under the dim yellow glow of the street lamp. He looked like he had been waiting for something, or someone. As I approached him, he stepped forward, giving me a little wave. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he said. His voice was calm, almost too friendly. "You know how to get to Sycamore Street?" I stopped, a little hesitant. Yeah. You just go straight, then take a left 2 blocks down." He nodded, smiling, but instead of leaving, he took another step closer. "You live around here? You seem like you know the area pretty well." Something about the question made me uncomfortable. My gut told me not to answer, so I just shrugged. "Kinda." He chuckled. "That's good. You must walk this way a lot then. Must be nice. Safe neighborhood, right?" That's when the first red flag really hit me. His questions weren't about directions anymore. They were about me, where I lived, how often I walked alone. I gave a tight smile and said, "Sorry, I gotta get home," and started walking. At first, I thought that was the end of it. But about a minute later, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, steady, matching my pace. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe he really was going the same way. I even slowed down a little to see if he'd pass me. He didn't. He slowed down too. The street was quiet enough that I could hear his shoes scuffing against the pavement. My heart started to pound. I crossed the street at the next corner, jaywalking, even though the light was red, just to put some distance between us. But when I glanced over my shoulder, he was crossing too. Same pace, same distance. That's when I knew. He wasn't lost. He was following me. I tried not to panic. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check something, and casually opened the camera app to use the black screen as a mirror. There he was, about 30 feet back. His head tilted down, like he was trying not to be obvious. I decided to take a longer route home, looping through a few side streets. Maybe I could lose him. But no matter where I turned, his footsteps followed. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but never gone. By the time I reached the edge of my neighborhood, my nerves were on fire. My house was just a few blocks away,
but there was no way I was letting him know where I lived. So I kept walking, past my street, past my block. That's when he finally spoke again. "You walk fast," he called out, his tone playful, almost mocking. "Where are you headed?" I didn't answer. I just kept moving, my pace quickening. "Hey, relax," he said louder this time. "I'm just making conversation." I turned a corner sharply, breaking into a jog. My mind was racing. What if he had a knife? What if he tried to grab me? The streets were too empty, the houses too dark. Nobody would hear me if I screamed. I spotted a small 24-hour laundromat up ahead. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a blue glow across the sidewalk. Without thinking, I bolted for it and yanked the door open, slipping inside. The place was almost empty, just an old man dozing in a chair near the dryers. The warmth and fluorescent lights felt like a shield. I pretended to load clothes into an empty washer, trying to look like I belonged. Through the glass door, I saw him. The stranger stopped outside, hands shoved in his hoodie pocket, staring at the laundromat. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then he smiled, this slow, unsettling grin, and raised his hand in a little wave. After that, he turned and walked away into the night. I waited nearly half an hour before leaving. When I finally made it home, I checked every lock on every door and window twice. I barely slept. The next morning, I told a neighbor about it, and they frowned. "Sycamore Street," they said. "That's not even close to here." He knew exactly where he was. And the worst part? For weeks after, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I walked home, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see him again under some street lamp. I never did, but to this day, I wonder, was he just some creep looking to scare me? Or was I lucky enough to walk away before he decided to do something worse?